Chapter 5 Kem Kunlun Unfrozen Spring. In the spring of that year, the whole of China was shrouded in the clouds of war. The Soviet Union deployed 3 army groups totaling more than 1 million troops along China's northern border, and China's close neighbor India also had constant friction with China's border guards. Sensing the threat of international hostile forces, the top echelons of the Chinese government have constantly readjusted their strategic arrangements, expanded their armed forces, prepared for war and famine, dug deep holes, and stockpiled grain extensively. When I went back to the city to visit my family, I was told inside that my parents' problems would soon be clarified organizationally, proving that my grandfather was not a landlord, he was a middle peasant, so it was only a matter of time before they were released. My father's comrade in arms, Uncle Chin, was the chief of the general staff of the military subdivision, and when the 9th Corps entered the Korean War, more than 100,000 volunteers surrounded the 1st Division of the most elite Marine Corps of the U.S. Army on the icy and snowy Gaima Plateau. In that brutal battle, my father braved the low temperature of minus 40 degrees Celsius to carry the seriously injured Uncle Chin out of the pile of dead people, and when they arrived at the ambulance, their bodies were frozen together by the blood on their bodies, and the nurse used scissors to cut the skin and flesh before separating. The friendship between them can no longer be measured by the words. Friends of life and death. And the historical problems of my parents are almost solved, and now it is not difficult for a divisional chief of staff to arrange for the son of an old comrade in arms to join the army. In a sense, the Chinese developed the habit of going through the back door first in the army. Uncle Chin asked me what kind of soldier I wanted to be a soldier, and I said that I wanted to be in Air Force, and I heard that the pilots had good food. Uncle Chin smiled and gave me a brain ads. How can a fighter be so easy to drive? You kid will send me to the field army, train hard for a few years, and then transfer you to the military region to work. I said that I would go back to work in the agency. Forget it, I am still willing to stay in the grassroots army, and I am not used to staying in the office. I wanted to go back to the Gang camp and say goodbye to the little fat swallow, but time did not allow it, so I wrote a letter to them, and I felt that I was sorry not to go, and I went to the army to be a soldier, leaving a good friend to cut the queue in the ravine. But I didn't have this feeling after 3 months, and then I realized how comfortable it was to be an educated youth in the mountains. I was platooned by the conscription office to a unit that was about to be re-equipped with an armored division, but I didn't expect that by mistake. After 3 months of hard work in the recruit training camp, the Central Military Commission ordered this unit to be transferred to the 62nd Dao Squad Station in Kunlun Mountain Pass on the Qinghai-Tibet Plateau. And the whole division was reorganized into an engineering unit. In fact, it is not surprising to say this. The situation at that time was that the troops of the whole country were digging holes to engage in civil air defense construction, all kinds of holes, air defense, ammunition reserves, strategic concealment, and so on. And there were almost no troops in the whole army that did not dig holes. The difference is that my unit has changed from amateur digging to professional digging. And our task is a first-class secret, to build a huge underground combat readiness facility in the depths of Kunlun Mountain, although the soldiers are not clearly told the purpose of this facility. But people with a little brain should be able to guess it. There are secrecy regulations in the army, so everyone never talks about it. It is also rumored that after completing this engineering mission, we will be assigned back to the sequence of the field army. Kunlun Pass is also known as Kunlun Pass, 4,767 meters above sea level. From a geological point of view, it belongs to the permafrost desert landform. Is composed of complex metamorphic rocks that are strongly corroded in ancient times. We are taught from top to bottom, in addition to digging trenches. We don't know anything about civil engineering construction, so the army sent a lot of engineers and technicians to guide the work and conduct intensive training for the commanders and fighters. For a period of 5 months, our task was to find a suitable hidden location for construction. Unfrozen Spring is located on the north bank of the Kunlun River, also known as Kunlun Spring. Granite slabs circle the pool wall. The clear spring water in the pool keeps gushing out for thousands of years. Even in the cold winter it never freezes. No one knows where the spring leads underneath. The higher authorities conveyed discipline and ordered the soldiers not to bathe here, because the local Tibetans regarded the unfrozen spring as a sacred spring and often worshipped the spring. In the past, when Tibet was just liberated, the Tibetan army passed through this place, and at that time these regulations had not been issued, and 3 soldiers bathed in the spring, and they were all drowned in the spring, and the cause of death was said to be because the spring water contained a large amount of sulfur, and their tombs were placed at the military station not far from here. And the last supply station of our detachment was also located there. Finally entered Kunlun Mountain. Almost all of them had severe altitude sickness. Everyone's faces were purple, and their eyes became blurred, and they seemed to hallucinate in our eyes. And our team of more than a dozen people is not as good as a small ant in this majestic mountain range. On the way to the march, I remembered the book handed down by my grandfather, which once said that the Kunlun peaks and 5,000 peaks are the ancestors of the dragon veins in the world, and these mountains from the ancient times to the present, I don't know how many secrets are buried in them, and according to legend, the mausoleum of King Gezer, the hero king of Tibetan myths and legends, and the gate to the demon kingdom are hidden in these undulating mountains. In ancient Tibetan customs, sky burial is not the highest treatment. The highest specification is tower burial. Chapter 6: 100 Skins of Beautiful Women. The task of the advance team was to find a suitable construction site, accompanied by 2 engineers, a surveyor, and a geological surveyor, and they abandoned the car and marched in the mountains for 2 whole days. And the next day at dusk everyone set up tents to rest, and scattered snowflakes drifted on the lead-clouded sky, and it seemed that a heavy snowfall would fall in the evening. The 4 engineers and technicians were all bespectacled intellectuals, and one of them was a woman, who was far from adapting to the harsh environment of the plateau. Lying in the tent and panting, and listening to the sound made people worry about their little bones. The company instructor and the squad leader were busy pouring water and medicine for them, persuading them to eat something, and the more they didn't eat, the more they would feel deprived of oxygen. The soldiers are physically strong, and when they enlisted, they have experienced the training of 5 kilometers of armed cross-country training in the recruit camp every day, and their ability to adapt to the environment is very strong. At this time they have basically adapted to the anoxic environment a little, and the campfire is lit with special white briquette fuel, and the soldiers gather together to keep warm, and eat half-cooked noodles and compressed biscuits, because the altitude is too high, the water cannot be boiled, and the noodles can only be boiled until half-cooked. Several comrades in arms who I knew well with were the big men, from Heilongjiang in the northeast, the Tibetan soldier, Gawa, who enlisted in the Tibetan area, and the Jilin signal soldier, Xiaolin, who was only 16 years old. A few of us finished eating the noodles in 2 bites, gasping for breath and resting, feeling that the strength of a meal on the plateau was simply greater than that of an armed cross-country march on the plains. Xiaolin rested for a while and said to me, "Brother Hu, you joined the army in this city and know a lot of things. Can you tell us a few stories?" The big man also agreed. "Oh," I said, "Lao Hu, it's too rare to listen to your chatter. The thief pulls hard. Anyway, I have to have a class meeting for a while, and I can't rest in advance, so I will give the comrades a bit of nagging first. Galva's Han words are not good, but I can understand it, and I want to say something." I opened my mouth for a long time. Ling didn't remember how to say it, just waved his hand at me. I guess he meant it probably. "You talk about it. I will listen to it too." I stuck out my tongue and said, "The air is so thin, why are you still so spirited? Come on, since the comrades want to hear it, I'll talk in the vernacular first, and when the class leader starts to put on small shoes for me at the class meeting, you have to help me intercede." Why do I say this? Because our squad leader doesn't like me very well. He enlisted in the army from the countryside, and like a little daughter-in-law, he stayed in the army for 5 years before becoming a small squad leader, and he especially looks down on me as a backdoor soldier, like the son of a high-ranking cadre. As soon as the class had a meeting, he asked me to speak, and he criticized me for a lot of loopholes in my speech, and almost all of them formed a fixed law, and those who made me angry, let alone mention it. But what should I say? I have read less than 10 books combined, including 4 by Mao, 1 quotation, 1 dictionary, 1 Red Sun, and 1 Young Guard. But I don't know all this to them, and I don't think they can understand this copy of The Secret Art of Feng Shui. I searched my stomach, and finally remembered a book borrowed from TianXiaBaChang when I went to the countryside, which was a very popular folklore manuscript at that time. The content of this manuscript was mainly based on the deeds of the Plum Blossom Party, and also added a lot of anecdotes in the society at that time, including a story of 100 beautiful women's skins, which left a particularly deep impression on me. The beginning of this story happened on a train from Beijing to Nanjing. Female college student Zhao Pingping went back to Nanjing to visit relatives on this train. The passenger sitting opposite him was a young and handsome PLA officer. The two chatted intentionally or unintentionally. Zhao Pingping was overwhelmed by the demeanor and conversation of the young officer, and learned that he had a good family environment and was highly educated, and Zhao Pingping even began to fantasize about marrying each other. Before he knew it, the train arrived at Nanjing Station, and the officer invited Zhao Pingping to sit in a restaurant near the train station, and during the meal, the officer went to make a phone call, and when he came back, he took out a letter and asked Zhao Pingping to help deliver it to his home in Nanjing, because he had an urgent task to rush back to the army first, so he couldn't go home first. Zhao Pingping agreed without hesitation, and then the two reluctantly parted. The next day, Zhao Pingping went to the officer's house to deliver the letter, and it was an old woman who received her, and the old woman took out the letter and read it, and then warmly invited Zhao Pingping to her home and poured her a cup of tea. Zhao Pingping drank a few sips of tea and chatted with the old woman, when she suddenly felt the Venus in front of her spinning around, and she fainted and fell to the ground. A bucket of cold, biting cold water woke Zhao Pingping, who found herself naked tied to a stripping orange, and the walls were covered in human skins. There were several people standing around, none other than the old woman and several of her men. She took the letter to Zhao Pingping and let her see it, and there was only one sentence on the letter. "Send the 100th beautiful skin, please check." The old woman sneered and said, "You are dying, let you die clearly. We are all hidden spies skinning women in order to fill them with explosives. A total of 100 human skins have to be prepared, and today we finally have enough to count." As he spoke, he took out a break knife and handed it to one of his subordinates, and asked him to skin Zhao Pingping alive. The break knife is a special knife for peeling, and the big man used the knife to cut the top of Zhao Pingping's head in her screams. As soon as I talked about Xingtou, I was interrupted by the second squad leader who came over. "Don't say anything, don't say anything. Hu Bai, you're making up nonsense again. Now our class has a class discussion meeting. Don't you like to say that, little mouth? Let's let you speak first this time." Chapter 7: The Great Glacier. I stood up and stood upright, and replied to him in the accent of the squad leader. No, why am I wrong? It should also be the turn of Lampuo's Gawazi to say that equality for all is the principle of socialism. The second squad leader said, "Comrade Xiaohu, why are you talking so much? I asked you not to learn to speak. I am the class leader. I let you say it. Don't talk about what is wrong in absolute egalitarianism." I looked at a few comrades in arms around me. They all sat seriously and waited for me to speak. Gawa took advantage of the squad leader's disappointment, and stuck out his tongue at me. "These pieces of material are too unrighteous. Now I can only find a step for myself." Report to the squad leader, "What are we discussing today?" "You haven't said it yet. You don't say, how can we speak?" At this time, the instructor came over. The instructor Li Jian was in his 30s, of medium stature, a very gentle person, a veteran of more than 10 years. He treated the officers and soldiers very well. There was no arrogance. He came over and said to everyone, "Comrades are in a meeting? I'll listen to it too." The second squad leader hurriedly saluted the instructor, and the instructor waved his hand and said that you continue. Don't affect your discussion because of me. The level of the second squad leader is very low, and he is very nervous when he sees the instructor next to him, and he doesn't know what to say. He may think that singing is relatively simple, so he said to the soldiers, "Comrades, let's sing a revolutionary song together to boost morale." The fighters replied in unison, "Swollen." The instructor almost laughed when he heard it, and quickly pretended to cough twice to cover it up. The second squad leader didn't hear anything ridiculous, raised his hands with a serious face, and made a musical conductor's action. Comrades, I'll start first. Erlang Mountain, prepare, sing. Erlang Mountain, even if you are 10,000 feet tall, the People's Liberation Army is an ironclad man. You are determined to break through. You are not afraid of the wind blowing, not afraid of the snow drifting. You want to build the highway to Tibet. The snow in the sky is getting bigger and bigger, and the chorus of more than a dozen soldiers echoes in the white snow flying in the sky of Kunlun Mountain. And I don't know whether it is the vast mountains and snow that sets off the majesty of the military song, or the songs of the soldiers embellish the desolation and loneliness of Kunlun Mountain. Finally, the instructor said a few words to everyone. Like all of you, it is the first time for me to go to Kunlun Mountain. The conditions here are indeed very difficult, the environment is very harsh, and we are facing the most severe test. But my comrade brother, we are not ordinary troops. The title of our company is Fighting Hero Company. This honor is the predecessors of the 6th Company with their lives and blood in exchange. We cannot give this banner a black in any case. Now the Chairman Mao of the Party Central Committee has handed over this glorious task to us, which is a huge trust in our 6th Company. We must carry forward the revolutionary military style of not being afraid of hardship and death to successfully complete this task. Comrades, are you determined? We all replied yes. The instructor nodded with satisfaction and continued. Rest early today. Our team will cross the big glacier tomorrow. Everyone must prepare in advance. Okay, disband. On the morning of the 3rd day of entering the mountains, the team arrived at the Great Glacier, which is said to be a very low-lying small basin near which our destination was located. Since it was a classified mission, it was impossible to find a local guide to lead the way. In fact, no one knew the way, so he had to make a rough military map and find his destination in the grassy contour lines. The big glacier is composed of 3 parts. The drop is very large, the slope is very steep, the highest altitude is more than 6,000 meters, the snow does not melt for 10,000 years, the longest section in the middle, all are mirror-like slippery ice, the ice thickness reaches hundreds of meters, the lowest is lower than the average altitude of the TianXiaBaChang Plateau, like a crack deep into the earth. Here the ground atmosphere is warm to form a rare green plant belt. In the lowest place, the altitude sickness is also reduced. If you want to continue to go to the depths of the Kunlun Mountains, you must pass through the valley under the big glacier. Before leaving, the engineer warned everyone not to make any too loud noise when marching under the glacier, otherwise they would have to be buried alive if they caused an avalanche at the top of the mountain. The crowd didn't even dare to catch their breath, but there was an accident on the way, and in the process of descending from the glacier into the valley, an engineer from Beijing fell down the glacier, and we found his broken body in the oasis below the glacier. Luo Ning, a female geological prospector, and he were colleagues in the same unit, and when they saw this tragic situation, they couldn't help but want to cry loudly. A geologist surnamed Wang hurriedly covered her mouth with his hand and whispered, "Don't cry." Luo Ning buried his head deep in Wang Gong's arms, sobbing in pain. The instructor took the lead in taking off his hat and said a silent farewell to his companion's body, after which Gawa and I collected his body and buried it in a bag. This engineer was with us for less than 3 days, and I only knew that he was from Beijing, and I didn't even have time to know his name, so he died silently. The big man gently dug the soil on the ground with a sapper's shovel, dug a few times, and suddenly from the pit he dug, a big blue fireball, the size of a basketball, circled twice in midair, and rushed into the crowd at once, and the members of the team hurriedly dodged. The fireball fell to the ground, the blue flame gradually extinguished. It turned out to be a strange little ladybug. The whole body is like a red transparent crystal, the wings are even more crystal clear. Through its transparent carapace, you can vaguely see the translucent internal organs inside. There seems to be a faint flame flowing. It looks indescribably mysterious and weird. Everyone looked at each other and wanted to ask what kind of bug this was. But no one can give an answer. Probably a species that has not yet been discovered. Wang Gong leaned over curiously, pushed the deep myopia glasses on the bridge of his nose, and excitedly pinched the ladybug like a red flame with 2 fingers, and looked at it carefully. But at this moment, the place where his fingers touched the ladybug was ignited by a blue flame, and in an instant, the majestic flame engulfed his whole body. Wang Gong's whole body was engulfed by blue flames, and his skin was instantly covered with a layer of large bubbles. And then it was burned again, and the myopia glasses on the bridge of his nose burned and deformed and fell to the ground, and he also fell to the ground in pain and twisted and struggling. It was too late for us to save him, and the screams of him being burned by the fire demon resounded through the valley, and everyone shuddered to hear it, and it seemed that he would not breathe for a while. Someone wanted to use a shovel to shovel soil to extinguish the flames on his body, but the burned area of his whole body had reached 100%, which was a deep burn, even if the fire on his body was temporarily extinguished. In the depths of Kunlun Mountain, where there was a shortage of medical treatment, I am afraid that he would not be able to endure for an hour or two. Wouldn't that make him suffer alive? This scene of a living person being burned by fire was too cruel. Luo Ning didn't dare to look at it anymore. She turned her head over. Her expression froze. She covered her ears, opened her mouth, and didn't know if she wanted to cry or shout. The youngest, Kobayashi, was also frightened, hiding behind the big man, his whole body shaking. The second squad leader took out a pistol and wanted to help him end his pain, but he really couldn't bear to see him suffer so much, and if he continued to shout, he would have to cause an avalanche. The instructor pressed the hand of the second squad leader, who was pulling the bolt, and whispered to him, "You can't shoot, use a bayonet, let me come." Tens of thousands of tons of snow hang over the glacier at the top of the mountain, and the slightest noise could have catastrophic consequences. Now the only thing we can do to help Wang Gong is to put a bayonet on his heart, and let him die a happy death. Without delay, the instructor took the bayonet-mounted Type 56 semi-automatic rifle from the hand of a soldier, and said softly, "Brother comrade." As soon as he closed his eyes, he plunged the military stab into Wang Gong's heart. Wang Gong finally stopped his heart-rending howl, fell to the ground and did not move, and the flames on his body continued to burn. The instructor was just about to pull the bayonet out of his heart, when the strange blue flame suddenly lit up, and it actually passed down the bayonet and from the body of the rifle. The speed of the flame transmission was so fast that it didn't even take more than a blink of an eye, and before people could see what was happening, the instructor's whole body was already engulfed in blue flames. The instructor is also the same as Wang Gong, struggling and screaming in pain. Everyone usually knows the instructor too well. He is definitely a tough guy, although the appearance is weak, but his endurance and perseverance are up to the standards of the best professional soldiers. I don't know how tragic the pain of being burned by that strange fire will make him let out such a sorrow. The second squad leader raised a pistol with tears in his eyes. Now he doesn't care if it will cause an avalanche. He really can't bear to watch the instructor suffer anymore. Just at the moment when he was about to pull the trigger, the instructor, who was on fire all over his body, suddenly said, "I order. None of you are allowed to shoot. Get your comrades out of here." The instructor's pain was unbearable, but he was still sane, and he realized that his screams might cause an avalanche, and in order not to make a sound, he reversed his red-hot bayonet and plunged it into his heart. After a long, long time, his body was burned into a fine pile of ashes. The remaining members of the squad watched this heroic and tragic scene in pain. Everyone clenched their fists tightly, gritted their teeth, and tried to hold back the tears rolling in their eyes, and some of them had their lips bitten by themselves. There is no sound in the valley, and the blue sky overhead is reflected on the ice surface of the big glacier, giving people the illusion that there seem to be two identical skies in this world, and it is not clear which one is above and which is below, and the magnificent scenery, like a fairyland, is full of strange and terrifying atmosphere. There were 2 piles of ashes on the ground, and just a few minutes ago, they were all alive, but now they were small piles of ashes, burned so that there were no bones left. Who would have believed that something like this would happen in the world if it weren't for someone who witnessed what happened? Suddenly, from the ashes left after Wang Gong was burned, a blue fireball flew out. It hovered in midair in front of everyone, as if it was choosing the next target. Its speed was extremely fast, and within its attack range, no one was sure that it could escape. There was a slight vibration in the air, presumably the sound of the strange ladybug flapping its wings in flight. Now the team has lost 3 people, all of whom are the most important members, as the instructor of the team leader, and 2 engineers have died, and the remaining 2 engineers, one is Luo Ning, a surveyor, and the other is Lu Gong of the Shanghai Geological Exploration Institute. It seems that this task cannot be completed. The absence of the instructor made the soldiers lose their backbone, but almost all of them had the same thought in their hearts when faced with this strange blue fireball. I would rather be buried alive by an avalanche than be burned alive by this ghostly thing. A few soldiers who couldn't hold their breath had already raised their guns and aimed at the ladybugs in midair, and the second squad leader suddenly took a step forward and said to everyone, "Comrades, the instructor has sacrificed, and now I am the captain. I ordered you all to give me a life to go back, right?" I understood what the second squad leader wanted to do. He wanted to sacrifice himself to buy some precious time for the others to evacuate. I grabbed his arm and choked up. "No, you're not a party member. Why are you going?" "I'm going to go." The second squad leader pushed my hand away. "You Xiaohu, you are not even a member of the group. I asked you not to learn to speak. Why don't you listen?" Before he could finish speaking, he rushed towards the fireball hanging in the air without looking back.